Hello and welcome to Petrol Apes. Today we are going to take a look at the Suzuki Swift Sport, short SSS. This is the old gen model, and what is different about that is mainly that the engine in the new models was replaced by a 1.4 liter turbocharged engine. In here we still have a 1.6 liter naturally aspirated engine which produces 136 horsepower and 160 newton meters of torque. So this power has to move around 1100 kilograms, and why this car could be interesting is that you can find it very often on the racetrack. So people buy it, modify it and put it on the racetrack, and many rentals offer the car for the racetrack. So there is something sporty about this car, and today we want to find out what's good and what's bad about this car, and if the old model is still a reasonable purchase. So let's find out. Okay, let's start inside first. So what's different compared to the normal old Swift? The steering wheel is different, the gear shifter is different, and the seats are different. So these are the differences. And the speedometer is also different. Let's start with the steering wheel because that's what we always have in our hands. I think it's a very good steering wheel. It has the right thickness, it looks nice, it has a red stitching, and here it is a bit perforated, and so that is very good. The shifting knob, I don't know, it's a bit hard. I think they could have used a bit of leather here, but it's really okay. The speedometer, it's simplistic, but it's cool. It has some red accents, and what's also very interesting is that they the speed ranges they took from the Japanese system, I would say. So the first step is 30, then 60, then 90, then 100, 120, and I think these are the average speed limits in Japan. So that's quite interesting. The seats are better than in the normal Swift, definitely, but for me they lack a bit of shoulder support, and I think the general seating area is a bit too wide. I think it should be a bit narrower, because like this it feels more like an armchair. So yeah, that's something that I don't really like that much. Then another thing is the used materials inside here. It's hard plastic almost everywhere. So like I said, the steering wheel is really good, it's leather, etc. But the rest is really hard plastic, plastic, everything, yeah? And I don't really have a big problem with that, but I have a problem if this plastic is more of lower quality, because you can get scratches so easy in here, so that's really, really annoying. They could have done better at that side, but everything else, you have everything in here what you need. The steering wheel, the buttons on the steering wheel are just for volume and track changing and cruise control. That's it, and the general entertainment stuff is a bit older than we are used to today, so no touchscreen, etc. But it works, it has all the functionality we need, and yeah, I think it's okay. Since the Swift Sport is stock more a everyday car than a sports car, you might also consider everyday usability, and in that aspect I think the trunk is a bit too small, because it only fits 210 liters, which is really, really a small amount, and you also have to put your stuff over such a high wall. It reminds of the wall of Game of Thrones. So yeah, that's a bit annoying, but I would say just get a 5-door version, so you can also put luggage, etc. on the rear seats. Yeah, so that's it. Let's get started driving. The first thing I really have to say about this car is that The steering is really, really good. You get plenty of feedback. All your entered commands are well executed. The only thing that I would complain about is the smoothness of the steering in some situations. So you have a really good weight in the steering wheel, but sometimes it is a bit lightweight, I don't know. On this car we have 17-inch wheels, which also help on the steering feedback, and attached we have some very good fitting Continental wheels, so the whole setup is very good. The overall chassis in this car is really well balanced, etc., and also quite different to the normal Swift. We have around 1,100 kilograms which have to be moved in this car, and you really can fly through corners, etc., very fast, and it is very precise and planted. The roll of the car is not really noticeable, or in better words, there is no roll or no big roll, which makes it quite stable and predictable. Since this is also an everyday car, let's talk about the comfort aspect of the chassis. I think it's really good for sporty driving. I think for everyday use it's still okay. It is not super harsh, but you feel that it is a sport chassis, yeah. So don't expect a super smooth S-Class like ride. So one real fun thing in this car is that you can steer the car more by braking into tight corners. So that's really cool, and with that you can have oversteer instead of understeer in some situations. But in general, if you don't apply this braking, you get understeer eventually, but you really have to go very fast to achieve this. And I think it is a very good setup, and it is really fun to drive. If we talk about brakes, it's a bit different. I would say the brakes are okay. These are a bit bigger brakes than on the normal Swift, but not super fancy brakes, so no high maintenance cost, etc. And I think for country road driving they are quite stable. I didn't notice any fading when going downhill, etc. And even on the racetrack I think they should be okay for some stints, but I think on the longer run, if you want to go on the racetrack more often, I would get some other brakes. But I think I would do that on every car. When we are talking about brakes, let's talk about the pedals, because that's something where I'm not a big fan of. They are so close together but strangely arranged that you can't do heel and toe shifting in here. Or probably you can, but you have to practice a lot, and it is not super natural to do it in here, which is a bit sad for me, because when you are driving on the country road or on the racetrack, it makes sense to do heel and toe shifting to do proper rev matching. Now let's talk about engine and transmission. Normally I would say the engine is the heart of a car or whatever, but in this case I'm not entirely sure, but I'll explain now. In here we have a 1.6 liter naturally aspirated engine which produces 136 horsepower. I think it could be a bit more power, but it is okay. The acceleration is over 8 seconds to 100 kilometers per hour. Let's directly test it. But it is really fun, and that's one important thing to notice. It has to be fun and not be super fast if you want to use this car also as an everyday car. When this facelift came out, I test drove it, and I remember I had an old Civic with 80 horsepower or something back then, and what happened was that when I left the city, I downshifted to the second gear, full throttle, and the acceleration was amazing. It wasn't that super fast, but it really reminded me of my motorcycle, because it revved endlessly for that time being, and that was really some cool factor which I don't want to miss. And I think for people who are just starting their car career, this is really a very, very good entry car. But one thing that you have to live with if you decide to get this car is that under 3000 RPM you don't find any power. At about 4000 RPM the fun begins, and I definitely would say that is something that the new Swift can do a bit better, because it's a turbocharged engine. But I also think that the new engine isn't as fun as this one, because it has a lower rev range and it is not super predictable because it's turbocharged, etc. So I think for sporty driving this is the better and more predictable engine. But there are some things about this engine which I definitely don't like. So the first thing is that the speedometer implies that you can rev to about 7,200 to 7,500 RPM. But in some gears or in some situations, you really can't rev that high. It feels, and I also tested this with a ODB tester, that you only can rev to about 6,900 RPM, which is very, very low for a high revving car. So that is a bit strange and leads to a lower fun factor, I would say, but isn't super bad. But I would like to know what's going on in this case. It's really strange. Then the next thing is I think the car could use a lighter flywheel, because when you rev, the revs hang at some certain point and they don't go down very fast. So that's a bit annoying, especially when shifting before corners, etc. Then just some minor thing, that's the rev limiter. I think the Japanese guys could do these rev limiters so good, but in these modern days they started to just hang on the revs and not have this stop and going forward, which really sounds awesome and also feels very sporty. Then the last thing, I think the exhaust somehow reduces the power and the breathing ability of the engine, and the sound is very very silent, and I don't know. But I think everyone has to decide for himself what annoys him of the engine, and then you can tweak it to your likes. But I would go with a lighter flywheel, with an exhaust system, and probably with some software tuning. Now let's talk about the transmission and gearbox. In here we have a manual 6-speed gearbox, which is quite good, but sometimes it feels a bit bony and is a bit unprecise. That's something which I don't like. But in general it is much better than in a usual Swift or in a usual normal everyday car. So not too much to complain about here, but yeah, mostly the unpreciseness in some certain situations is a bit weird. Yeah. The car does not have a front locking differential or whatever, because the power is way too low for that. Yeah, so it doesn't need it. Then one important thing is, especially if you want to drive this in everyday cases, is that the consumption is really high for such a small car. So we are talking about an average of about 7 liters per 100 kilometers. And with that you didn't have much fun yet. So if you really want to push the car, it goes up to 10 to 12 or something. So yeah, it is an old engine, and that leads to the fact that it drinks a lot, but in these modern days it is a bit strange that it behaves like that. Regarding that topic, another thing is that the display in the speedometer regarding the consumption really behaves strange, because it notoriously shows 1 liter less than you actually consumed, and that's really a no-go for me. I don't know, 0.5 or something, that's okay, but 1 liter is really much. Now let's come to the conclusion. The Suzuki Swift Sport for me is not the best car in its segment, but I think it is the one with the best bang for the money, you could say, because you get a lot of stuff like xenon headlights, etc., where you would to have pay more at other manufacturers. And the general package is really good. It is more on the everyday side, not on the so sporty side, but I think it is good like that, because then you can tweak the stuff that you want to tweak. Yeah. Now let's come to the everyday part again. I think it is an everyday car, definitely, but you have to have in your mind the thing consumption, that it drinks a lot, and the thing with the low transport capability, which is really annoying. So if you want to transport some stuff, just get the 5-door version, and it is better, but still the trunk is a joke. Now let's talk about the topic comparing it to the new one. It's not a really comparison video, but just to give you an idea. So you can get this car in a used state for around 7,000 euros, and that is an okay-ish car. I think around 9,000 euros you really get a good car. And the new Suzuki Swift, at least here in Germany, costs 18,000 euros, and now we have around 9,000 euros difference. What you could do now is getting the old one and investing in it 9,000 more to your needs, and I think you will never fully use up this budget. But you could get a new chassis set up, get your new brakes, maybe to tweak the engine to your likes, or you could just finance with that a few track days or something like that. So I think it is considerable to just get the old car and there was save some money and invest it in other ways. But in the end, maybe find out yourself. Try, if you're really interested in buying one, try to drive both and then make your own conclusion. Okay, I think I'm done here. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, just leave me a thumbs up, and if you like, leave me a subscription so you will be notified about future videos. And if you have any questions regarding the old or the new one, just drop me a comment below, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!